And you hear it right there. The Senate's going to take a first break after the Democrats begin their case. Their case for the second impeachment trial of President Trump, their case to convict. Started with Congressman Jamie Raskin, the lead House manager, calling this a moment of truth for America and saying the Democrats would prove this was the worst violation of the presidential oath in the history of the United States of America. And their entire effort today to put the events of January 6th, that siege of the Capitol on January 6th, in context and show how over the course of several months, President Trump, by calling on fraud in the election, by saying that the election was going to be stolen, by then saying the election was stolen, was inciting the crowd that came to the Capitol on January 6th. They used video. They used the president's own words. This is the beginning of making their case, trying to put the events of January 6th in context and show how the president created the conditions for that siege. I want to go to Rachel Scott, up on Capitol Hill right now, our chief congressional correspondent. Rachel, any sense of how the Republican senators especially were taking this presentation?
We know that inside of the Senate chamber, George, there was that handful of Republican senators that we are keeping our eyes on. Senators Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Ben Sasse, they were seen taking extensive notes. But then on the other side, you had Senator Josh Hawley. He had his feet up on the chair, not really paying attention to anything that those House impeachment managers were saying. Today was about laying out the roadmap. They are alleging that Trump incited this mob, that they summoned him to that he summoned them to Washington, D.C., that he whipped the crowd into a frenzy, and then he shot them like a cannon down Pennsylvania Avenue. It was also clear how deeply personal this is. Congressman Neguse reminding the lawmakers there that a woman died 50 feet from where they ended up certifying the election results. They say that this did not just start with a speech on January 6th. They say that this started months before and that it ended in a deadly insurrection. We are also expecting, George, to see new video today. Video that aides say that the public has not seen before. That includes the jurors in this Senate chamber. This is new video. I'm told that it is surveillance footage from inside of the Capitol. They say that it is extraordinary video, and the point of this is to really remind the senators, make them relive what they saw that day. George.
Thank you, Rachel. These House managers chosen with care by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the lead manager, Congressman Raskin, of course, a professor of constitutional law. The other managers were litigators and prosecutors as well. I want to bring in our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. And Dan, let's talk about what Congressman Raskin did right at the start, trying to take the position that most of the Senate Republicans have took refuge in, that this is not a constitutional trial, trying to take that off the table by saying the Senate has decided that question.
Right, and I think it's very interesting the way he's almost analogizing it to a trial, in the sense that first you make your argument to the judge, which says, Judge, as a matter of law, we think this case should be dismissed. If the judge then denies that, in effect, the trial starts, and the facts then come out. And if you compare it to this situation, that argument occurred yesterday. Yesterday was the argument over the constitutionality of this proceeding. And the Trump team lost that. And I think Raskin is clever in basically saying, OK, now that that issue has been resolved, now let's focus on the facts. And of course, the facts are the real problem here for the president, not just the facts of what happened at the Capitol, but as the House managers are laying out everything leading up to that point. And if you accept even what Trump's own lawyer, Bruce Castor, said yesterday, which is that Trump lost this election. It's clear he lost the election. Then everything you just heard is an enormous lie, just as the House managers are alleging, which then explains a bit more of the context of how this happened.
Most of this, Dan, was about telling their narrative, as you just said. But Congressman Raskin, as we said, a former professor of constitutional law, also took on that argument the president's lawyers tried to make yesterday, made in their brief, that he had a First Amendment right to say what he said on January 6th, and therefore there cannot be an impeachable offense.
Right, and I should say, out of full disclosure, that he actually cited my father as one of the people who had discussed in that letter the First Amendment question. But look, I think that to just rely on something like the First Amendment and to say, well, it's his First Amendment right to speak. That doesn't answer the question of what he said and what was the context of what he said, because no one would claim the First Amendment is absolute. No one would suggest that you can say anything and be okay under the First Amendment. But putting that aside, when you're the President of the United States, you have an elevated obligation. Putting aside the legal questions and the constitutional questions, you could do something that might be protected speech under the First Amendment, which would still be absolutely impeachable. So I think that it was important for them to sort of get that argument off the table, both as a legal matter and as a matter of impeachment.
And in fact, he went even farther than that, used that famous phrase, the Oliver Wendell Holmes phrase, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, said instead what the president did on January 6th was like the fire chief starting the fire.
And remember, you can't falsely yell fire in a crowded theater. You can yell fire if there's a fire there. And that's the point here, is that it was false. It was made up. This was a lie. And I think that comparison that Raskin made was a very effective one. The question is, listening to Rachel, are there senators listening?
And that's what I want to bring to.
Is there any hope?
That's what I want to bring to John Karl as well. John, it certainly seems that the Democrats' case, which they've built with great care, is designed to put these Republican senators especially in the most uncomfortable position possible, not simply to argue about the Constitution, but to face the facts.
To face the facts and answer the question whether or not Donald Trump is responsible, bears responsibility, as Mitch McConnell himself has said, as, in fact, even Kevin McCarthy said during the House impeachment vote, if the president, in fact, bears responsibility for what happened on January 6th, what is to be done to hold him accountable? You saw Jamie Raskin make the argument that the constitutional issue is over, as you just discussed, that the jurisdictional constitutional issue is over. It's been resolved. The Senate has voted. This trial will go forward. But the bottom line is, George, you have 44 of those Republican senators who have now voted not once but twice that this is not a constitutional proceeding, that you cannot have an impeachment trial of an ex-president. Now, that doesn't mean that they all have made a final decision on conviction. But, George, everybody that I have talked to close to the Republicans and the Republican leader in the Senate says that, effectively, you're not going to see senators change their mind on this question. This is not a criminal process. This isn't like we've now just begun a criminal case in a criminal court. This is a political process. And those senators have made a very clear statement that they do not believe that it is appropriate or constitutional to convict in an impeachment trial an ex-president.
One of the big questions in Washington right now, does that include Senator Mitch McConnell? Bloomberg had a report this morning that suggested at least that he was open still to conviction.
Yes, and here's what happened. Senator McConnell spoke with the other Republican senators last night, and he reiterated, in fact, what he has been saying to them since late January, that now that the trial is underway, he would listen to the facts and make a decision. This was interpreted by some that means that he could vote to convict, and who knows? Perhaps he could, George. But the bottom line is, despite that story, I am told that nothing has changed in Mitch McConnell's views. He's never ruled out voting to convict, but he certainly doesn't seem to be heading in that direction, and he has made it clear now twice that he does not believe that it is, in fact, constitutional to impeach and to try a former president.
Okay, John Karl, thanks very much. Let's go to our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega. Cecilia, again, as they did yesterday, the White House going on with their normal business as this impeachment trial goes on. In fact, the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, holding a press conference at the start of this trial, and you were there.
I was in the room for that, George, and she held this press conference where she was pressed repeatedly. I pushed her as well about what the White House's response is to this impeachment trial, what the president's personal opinions are on this impeachment trial, and frankly, they're not biting. I did ask how the American public should interpret then the president's silence on this, and if that means that he is not engaged and not interested or invested in the outcome of this trial. And she said the American public, she told me, should interpret interpret this silence on the impeachment as that he is focused on working for the American people, and that is what they elected him to do. That's been par for the course. It's what we've been hearing from the White House. It's what we've been hearing from the president. I don't expect that to change. I've spoken with people who are close to the president, even behind the scenes. This is not something that he is focused on. It's not something that he is engaging friends and allies on in conversation in the Oval Office. It's a complete opposite way of handling an impeachment trial, of course, as we covered through President Trump, who was watching these hearings, who was live tweeting during them, who was phoning allies on Capitol Hill. And you mentioned kind of the counter programming. It wasn't just the press secretary. The president himself added a last-minute event at the White House just a few minutes ago where he announced that the U.S. government will now be sanctioning those military generals behind that coup in Myanmar. And now he is headed to the Pentagon later today. So, they're very much focused on this business as usual, sort of this nothing to see here strategy, because, again, we keep saying this, but it really is on the front burner for them. They've got to get this COVID relief package passed. They have set a deadline to have this passed by next month. And so that's where they're concentrated today and going forward.
And we'll continue. That's right. Okay, Cecilia, thanks. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.